no helicopters have been procured for me to go to golf course. Thank you.
I've never said he wasn't a great politician. I'm just saying he's a golfer.
He's listening to the interview.
How'd you play out there today?
Well, I found the conditions challenging, mostly because there's no grass on the golf course, but there never has been.
I'm thinking about the swag bag, and I had high hopes for the swag bag.
When you got 3 crevices on the green, your course is trash.
What's happening, folks? Welcome back, Beltway Golfer, episode 16. Alex Dixon here. Gonna keep the intro short. This is our longest episode to date. We sat down with Joe House, also known as House from DC, host of 2 very popular podcasts, Fairway, Rollin on golf, and House of Carbs on his love of eating and food, both a part of the extremely successful network of podcasts and blogs founded by his longtime close friend Bill Simmons, The Ringer. House is a native of the DMV, still lives in DC. Fanatic about golf, knows a lot about golf in this area. Has been golfing at courses for a long time. We covered a lot of different topics. We sat down for a while. He's not afraid of the mic. And so he was, I had to edit it down to get it under an hour. We chatted for a while. But before I get to it, over my left shoulder, if you're watching this, you'll see a Beltway Golfer t-shirt. It's our first ever piece of merchandise, getting into the merch game, trying to get a little revenue going to support this podcast and some of the things that we want to do going forward. So if you're a fan or you want to support the show, check it out, beltwaygolfer.com. Hopefully this is the first of more things to come as far as cool DC golf related gear. But that's it. Let's get to it. Episode 16, Joe House. Enjoy. East Potomac. We're out here in Southwest DC, nation's capital, at East Potomac Park with Joe House, House from DC.
The People's Golf Course. The People's Golf Course.
That's absolutely right. How are you?
I'm awesome. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing fantastic.
Yeah.
We are,
do you go by Alex or do you go by Beltway Golfer?
It's funny that I definitely go by Alex.
Okay,
I do not go. When I started Beltway Golfer, the idea was that I was not the Beltway Golfer. Beltway Golfer was supposed to be like
a community.
Yeah, just Beltway, which is meaning anybody. But my buddies have now started to call me Beltway in a mocking fashion.
Oh, well, I kind of like it. If I call you Beltway in a non-mocking fashion, it has a certain allure. It has a certain appeal.
So, and your friends. So most folks probably know you as House from DC. But I mean, are you outside of kind of the podcast world? Do your buddies call you Joe or House?
I'm House.
You're House.
I'm House.
You're
I've been House. It's just easier.
Sure.
When I go into Starbucks, I'm House because
Really?
It's like Joe doesn't really distinguish who it could be. There could be 10 Joes
Sure.
in Starbucks. There's most likely only one House.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting out here with you right now. One of the reasons is this is a DC golf show.
Yes.
And you're a DC. You're House from DC. So are you native?
I'm a native in the sense that I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Okay.
I went to high school in the district, and I've lived in the district for 25 years, and my son was born in the district. So I understand how important it is to be appropriate about claiming, citizenship.
Sure.
And so I'm a resident of the district. I love the district. DC's in my blood. I've rooted for all the teams my whole life, but I grew up in Maryland.
You're a native of the area.
A native of the area.
Granted, I grew up in the suburbs as well. I also grew up in Montgomery County. I'm not too much of a stickler for that reason. As far as you're a native of the area, so you've been in the DMV basically your entire life.
Well, yeah, except for when I went away to college. Otherwise, that's it.
I love it. And so, and you live in the area now.
I do. I live in the district.
And so, one of the reasons a lot of folks are familiar with your work is, I think you just touched on it, when you went away to college, you made a good friend and a college roommate that knows this medium pretty well.
He has, some people call him the Podfather.
I've heard that.
These days. So my second year of college ended up in a dorm at the College of the Holy Cross that was the last co-ed floor in the history of the college, and somehow I was there and Bill Simmons was there. I don't know whether or not it had anything to do with the fact that there were girls on our floor, but neither one of us had any luck with the girls. What we had luck with was getting along very well on the topics of basketball and barbecue. So we became fast friends as pals. The dorm that we lived in was the closest dorm to the field house, the so-called field house, which was an awesome venue for informal pickup and for intramural. And we played hundreds of hours of pickup basketball together, and many times we would finish, jump in the car, and go downtown for a little barbecue in Worcester, Massachusetts, the hotbed of barbecue. But it's not at all, but it's what we liked, and that's what we did.
I was gonna say, I actually I drove and stopped with my family in Worcester, Massachusetts just this summer on the way back from Maine, and but we stopped at a Wendy's. We didn't have, we didn't have any great barbecue. So before we get into the golf, so I wore am I wearing my Wizards hat?
I love it.
I got my Wizards hat on.
You're repping.
So you're talking hoops, and so I think based on some earlier conversation, you might be just a smidge older than I am. So I was born in this area, but I was way too young. I mean, I was one essentially when the Bullets won their title.
Yes. So
do you remember that?
Not only do I remember it, my very first basketball game ever was the Game 7 in 1978 against the San Antonio Spurs that the Bullets won to advance to the NBA.
You weren't at that game, right?
I was at that game.
You were at that game.
It's the first basketball
you
game.
were ever at. Was Game 7.
The first professional basketball game I ever attended. 1978.
Hey, Joe, you want to go to a game? I've never been to one. Let's just start with Game 7.
Well, I had a classmate, a pal, and he and his dad somehow came into tickets. I think somebody had given the dad the tickets, and he's like, he knew even then that I was a hoop head, 9 years old back then. 9? Yeah. And, it's like, I want to go. And his dad drove us up there, and it was me and my pal and the dad, and what a game.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So obviously that was at the Cap Center.
It was at the Cap Center.
That's incredible. I mean, what an introduction to professional basketball.
Well, I had a huge interest also in college basketball. I grew up 2 miles from the University of Maryland, the campus there. So I'm a huge Terps fan and was lucky enough to go to a ton of games at Cole Fieldhouse. And so, that was really what clinched my interest in basketball.
Did I misspeak then earlier when I said I was from Montgomery County also? Or did you grow up in PG County?
No, I grew up in Montgomery County.
Oh, you did? Okay.
You can go, right on the edge.
Right on East West Highway.
I was up University Boulevard.
Okay.
Like in the Four Corners area.
Yeah, I know it well.
Yeah.
Is it Four Corners Pub? Is it still there?
It is.
Is that what it's called now?
Golly, Wally. I'm going to blow it. And my brother's going to be so mad at me.
I've been there a million times. It's not called Four Corners. It's at Four Corners.
Yes.
But it's called something else. And
right. And I was about to say Stained Glass, but that's not it.
No,
Stained Glass is up Laytonsville Road.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whatever. We're gonna have to look that up, and I'll add it in a dubbed voice where we get the name right. Maybe it is Four Corners Pub. But in any case, so you're big. So the Terps were big back then too.
They were unbelievable. Yeah. An unbelievable run for my youth through high school, and I was lucky enough to see 10 Len Bias games at Cole Fieldhouse. At Cole Fieldhouse. Yeah.
So you weren't in college then, were you?
I was in high school when he passed. I was in high school when he got drafted by the Celtics, and then had the cocaine overdose. Yeah. And it was a devastating day. I can still remember the circumstances under which I got the news. My mom told me it was pretty early in the morning, and this was in the mid '80s, so I was hungover. Because this was still the era where the legal drinking age was 18, and I was close enough to that. Sure. Not quite, but
good. Yeah, I think that's a moment. I mean, I think I was in elementary school, so I remember where I was when I heard the news, but it wasn't a great story. I think a buddy told me as we were walking home from school or something. But yeah, it's one of those moments around here where everybody remembers where they were.
Yeah. If you had any connection at all to Maryland or were just a fan of the program, that's right.
Yeah. And you've done, is it with Ryan Russillo and Bill Simmons, a couple podcasts recently where you guys go back and kind of analyze specific games, but one game? Because I think I heard one where you did maybe the Bulls versus the Bullets, 97 maybe?
Yeah, so 96? The onset of the pandemic back in March took everybody's planning around, NBA game content and threw it right out the window. So Simmons, to his credit, and the whole Ringer team, you know, as they do, got creative around, you know, what can we talk about that's going to be interesting to people as everybody tries to figure out what the hell's going on.
Sure.
And, you know, they kind of landed on two things that, you know, was a very nice coincidence. So ESPN had in its back pocket The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan 10-part documentary.
Yep.
And they fast forward. It wasn't supposed to come out until June.
Right.
And in view of what was happening with the pandemic, and it wiped out all of their programming, they pushed up the release date. And in connection with that, Simmons and Russillo and the Ringer NBA team came up with two concepts. One was the rewatchables, where we watched old Bulls games, and the other was redraftables, where we took under consideration and review drafts from the 90s and into the early 2000s and said, where were the mistakes made? You know, how could we fix this? But one of the rewatchables games was indeed a 1997 Bullets-Bulls game.
I listen to that. You guys go way deep into it.
Well, I mean, it was a great era.
Yeah.
For the Bullets. It was a very exciting time, and I had season tickets then out at the Cap Center because me and my brothers had gone in together on a package. We wanted to have tickets when the stadium moved downtown, so we wanted to be in on the ground floor for that. And so we had, like back in '95, we bought tickets together. We were going out there to all those Bullets games. Chris Webber, Jawan Howard, Rod Strickland, Georgie Murasan, Tracy Murray.
Calbert Cheney.
It was a good era.
Yeah.
A good era.
Yeah, they had a good time. Young Ben Wallace, young Rasheed Wallace,
Young Rasheed, all of it.
all kinds of guys.
Yeah.
I went to one of those games. I always forget if it was '96 or '97 when the Bulls came here. They swept in the first round. They swept the Bullets.
Yes.
But me and a buddy went out. I guess it would have been game 3 because I think it was a 3-0 a 5-game series. But what was so memorable about it, me and my buddy are there, and we're maybe just out of high school. And at the end of the game, it's a sweep. And this whole story is indicative of the way the team was marketed in the 90s. At the end of the game, Bullets are going home after getting swept, and confetti, at the Cap Center, confetti fell from the roof. Yeah. And for some reason, that stuck with me. Like, I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's right. The participation trophy confetti.
That's right.
We participated against the Bulls. Hooray!
That's right. Does Simmons golf much?
You know, he has started in the last handful of years, and really this is the origin story for how I got, the good fortune of having anything to do with the golf podcast. I'd been after Simmons for a long time to rekindle his connection to golf. He grew up as a kid in New England and had some golf in his background. He caddied for a while at a couple places up there when he was in high school, and he played and had then and still has a good golf swing. He gave up the game in those high school to early adult days because he didn't have the patience for it. He would get too frustrated. Sure. He's an extraordinarily competitive person, and if if there's no possibility of him being the best at something, back then he didn't have the patience to stick with it.
That happens to a lot of guys, I think, at that age, especially when you're just kind of figured out. As soon as you start getting frustrated, I have a couple buddies like that, and then early on, their clubs ended up in a pond, and
that's it.
That was it.
There you go. That's the Bill Simmons story, also, and also his love of basketball. He knew that he loved basketball, and that was the thing that he spent hours and hours and hours playing.
So when did you were you a golfer as in high school?
So I grew up really in Silver Spring. I live, a mile and a quarter from the Sligo Creek Golf Course, right there off of Dennis Avenue and Sligo Creek Parkway. Yep. And I was a lifeguard at a small community pool in Montgomery County with a group of guys, and we would wake up weekday mornings at 5:30 or 6, and we would either go to Sligo or down to Rock Creek.
Yep.
And we ended up going to Rock Creek a lot more than Sligo because there was a lot more competition at Sligo for the first balls in the air.
Yep.
And because there's only 9 holes at Sligo, you had to just get in the queue, and we weren't willing to get up early enough to get into the queue. But Rock Creek, because of the 2 9s, you could work out a way to get off a 9 one way or the other at 6:30 in the morning before we had to go be at the pool.
But Sligo Creek, I mean, that's still. I guess they're getting threatened a little bit now with expansion of the Beltway potentially.
I've heard that, but I mean they've withstood all threats, all incoming, because they thought about putting Montgomery Blair there for a little bit. You know, when Montgomery Blair down in lower Montgomery County moved up to Four Corners, one of the potential destinations was Sligo, and it is beautiful property. It would have been beautiful for the school, but enough of the community rallied around preserving the golf course that the golf course is still going strong there. I also played quite a bit out at Northwest Park at the Inside Nine. Yeah, that was another good loop where you could go around with pals and not worry about holding anybody up or quality of play or anything like that.
Which is that's still going. They still
of course,
yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned you went to school in D.C. Yeah, you Gonzaga guy?
I'm a Gonzaga guy, yeah.
Did they I imagine, I should know this, they must have a good golf team, right?
They have an outstanding golf team now and like over the last 15 years or so. When I was in school, they had a good golf team, but like golf and lacrosse were still back in the 80s up and coming sports, and there weren't like, not every high school in the area had golf teams. Not every high school in the area had lacrosse teams, so I think lacrosse might have even started off as a club sport. Golf was a varsity sport when I was at Gonzaga, but like the quality of play and the competition and all of it now, none of the kids, maybe one kid from that era when I was in high school could play on the Gonzaga golf team now. Now they're they're D1 level kids.
Right. Interesting. So, so you go to Holy Cross. You and Simmons become close. Simmons, he becomes this media giant. He's credited as kind of or getting the whole podcast world going as the Podfather. But it was really way before that. He was one of the first big sports bloggers, and he's credited for.
He was kind of a pioneer.
That's the word I'm looking for.
In terms of being a guy who is willing to try new mediums and new technologies, and he went to journalism school up in Boston at Northeast University, and then got a degree, and then went to work immediately at I think what's not the Globe, the other Boston, the Herald. Yeah, and he was basically like behind 15 middle-aged white guy columnists, and saw like there's no way. He was on a high school beat, and he loved it. He was going around to the local Boston area high school basketball games and doing feature stories and that kind of thing. But he always had in his sights doing commentary, being a pundit. And he had that. He was very popular at our school, on our school newspaper. So he had a column at the school newspaper. He was a columnist on our school newspaper, and he also was doing football and basketball games for Holy Cross on our local radio station. But after he got his degree in journalism and was working at the Herald for a bit, AOL.com came along, and basically it's like, they didn't pay anything, but if you want to write for free, you can do it, and there are no restrictions on length. So if you have a perspective on something and you want to
go 10,000 words, have at it.
Go do it. Right. Yeah. And so he was able to kind of get his reps that way. It was a volunteer job, essentially. Almost no money whatsoever. And he built a little following because of, his innate sense for what a sports fan likes, and just sort of giving a voice to the regular sports fan.
Yeah, being a little bit more irreverent and sounding a little bit different than what you read by the, like as you put it, middle-aged white guys in the paper or on TV doing the games.
Yeah.
So you're doing multiple podcasts.
It's true.
You've been part of the Ringer for some time now.
Since it started.
We're talking about Bill, kind of launching, slowly kind of building up his media empire, if you want to call it.
Right.
Have you been kind of, working with him this whole time? Or did I kind of, I've heard him reference House from DC for years and years and years and years and years.
Right. So, yeah, I've been a character in the Simmons universe since the AOL Digital City days.
Okay.
Because we would, as lots and lots and lots of guys, get on the phone. We had old phones that you dial or press buttons on, not cell phones.
Yeah.
and just rant about games. We would watch games and then get on the phone with each other and yell at each other for an hour about what we just watched as avid sports fans. And that was the way, we were huge baseball fans, huge basketball fans, huge NFL fans, and huge hockey fans. And both DC and Boston, when we were together, were in kind of down periods, sports-wise, in that sort of, late 80s, early 90s period. Boston managed to correct direction, fix that, and has
and then some.
Been on a tear. The District of Champions is on the come up, though.
Yeah,
we've got the World Series, we got the Stanley Cup, the women,
Mystics,
absolutely, with WNBA champs. So we're catching up, but we still got a ways to go to get to Boston. But like that was, he in those early days at AOL would be like. I talked to House and, he would sort of share some of the stuff that was the substance of our conversation.
Yeah. What was your first podcast? Like when you had your own podcast?
Again, to his credit, when he arrived at ESPN. So ESPN read a story that he wrote back when he was at AOL's Digital City Boston that was critical of the ESPYs, and they thought it was so funny and clever and had the right level of combination of good humor and incisive criticism.
Yeah.
They hired him. And so he started writing for ESPN back in early 2000s. And in 2007, the podcast technology kind of arrived as a thing. And he was at ESPN and he went to them. They were doing no podcasts at all. None.
And when he was writing was it page 2?
He was doing page 2, and then page 2 ended up getting folded into main page stuff, and I don't remember that whole timeline. Okay. But in 2007, the podcast technology sort of arrived on the scene, and he took a look at it, and he's like, I want to try this. I want to see. And they said, okay, sure, go ahead. Yeah. And, the great support and infrastructure of ESPN meant that he had access to upper echelon sports folks, and at that point in time, obviously, there wasn't great traction with podcasts, so he was just again getting reps with learning his own voice, learning what worked, interviewing people. One of his worst experiences in interviews. Should I wait?
I think you're fine. I think that adds to it. Right?
It is authentic. I mean, the Washington Monument's that way, the Marine barracks are that way, and there are the helicopters. But he interviewed Tony Stewart in one of the first handful of the NASCAR guy. Yeah. And Tony Stewart had never heard of Bill Simmons, and Bill Simmons didn't have anything to do with NASCAR, and it was a flat interview, and Stewart was kind of a dick, and Bill's like, I learned something today. You don't just say yes and interview any old guy off the street. You have to have a point of view. You have to know something about the subject. And that was a good, instructive moment for him. But very early on in the podcasting, he started calling me up and saying, hey, I'm going to tape this conversation, basically. Right. And it's the same phone conversations we've been having since we were, 18, 19 years old. In college, on break at college, and can you believe this baseball game or this basketball game?
And it's almost no different when you got a radio show that you really like, and you got a recurring character, a recurring caller that calls up, and he's always riffing on something. You were that guy. It's a lot easier to do when it's recorded and in a podcast.
That's exactly right.
Interesting.
So I started getting some reps with him back in that 2008, 2009 time, and he was calling me up at my day job. I worked for the government for about almost 10 years. As a lawyer, and he's like, do you have a half hour to talk about this this Wizards game or this Bulls game? Like, yeah, I have time. Let's do it. It's lunchtime. Let's go.
Yeah.
So that was, and then as he went along at ESPN and his own star, rose up and podcasts kind of, got to be more and more of a thing. He involved me a lot more, and he started off with the BS podcast at ESPN, which became very popular. And, I got to be a kind of a recurring character on those. Yep. And then when he left ESPN in 2015, he took a 6-month break, and he re-arrived on the media scene in the fall of 2015. And the very first thing he did was restart the podcast, the Bill Simmons podcast. He had Cousin Sal on the first one, he had Judd Apatow on the second one, and he had me on the third one. And we've been podcasting ever since.
I love it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until The Ringer that you officially kind of had your own podcast?
Well, and it was actually kind of like, it was right as The Ringer was coming into existence, because he re-arrived on the scene with the Bill Simmons podcast, and it really hit the ground running. It was super popular in the fall of 2015, early 2016. Callaway reached out to Simmons out of the blue and said, yo, we want to do something with you.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is, but we want to do something. They had Jeff Shackelford,
Yep.
the golf commentator, author,
Yep.
architect,
Yep.
super impressive golf resume. He was under umbrella at Callaway. They said, we have this guy, we have an idea for a podcast. What do you think? And Simmons is like, I'm not really that connected to golf, but my buddy House has been gambling on golf for 15 years.
I may have a guy.
Yeah, I may have a guy.
Right.
And, I was not just gambling, also an avid player.
Sure.
I'm a volume player.
Sure.
I'm a quantity over quality kind of golfer.
Sure.
Still double-digit handicapper to this day. But he reached out, was like, do you want to do a golf pod? And I'm like, yeah, I want to do a golf pod. Sure, let's give it a try. What could possibly go wrong? So we got on the phone with Jeff Shackelford. Jeff at that time was working on the architecture, the renovation of LACC North with Gil Hance, because Jeff was working with Gil Hance in a partnership. And he called me one day driving off site, and he's like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And we got along great. And there was a sort of a natural framework there. It's like Jeff is kind of the established golf presence, the guy who really knows what the hell he's talking about, and then me as an aficionado of the game, a lover of the game, willing to sort of learn some of the ins and outs of the tour, and just basically using Jeff as a foil for me as kind of the golf everyman with the golf expert, and it was really fun. I loved it.
Yeah, no, it was really enjoyable, and so you also brought obviously some gambling acumen to the show.
Acumen might be overstating it, but definitely interest.
Some enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm
around,
for sure.
Around
Yes.
gambling.
Yeah.
And so Shack House was on from
2016 all the way to the end of 2018, and then Jeff and Callaway, kind of parted ways, and the Ringer wanted to stay in the golf podcast space, so I hung on through 2019, and we did a bunch of shows with a lot of different Ringer personalities and guests in the pro golf world, and then this year we were prepared to be doing kind of a regular season until a global pandemic struck, and we started the show back up in June, and Nathan Hubbard, who is the older brother of PGA Tour player Mark Hubbard, has been a friend for a long time. We've known Nathan and played golf with Nathan a whole bunch of times.
Pretty successful guy in his own right.
Pretty successful guy in his own right, yeah. For his walk of life, former CEO of Ticketmaster, just sold a business.
He started a company and sold it to Ticketmaster.
Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah. So, but he had some time on his hands, and he had a really unique perspective about how the PGA Tour was going to try and conquer, the pandemic and proceed successfully with its own sort of concept of a bubble. It's not like a hard bubble the way the NBA's been a bubble. Yeah. But and he and I have been friends for a long time. So there's always that natural chemistry that matters for podcasts. Is are you friends with the person you're talking to? Yeah. And he and I are great friends, so it's been fun.
That's great. I'm sure there's some folks, especially listeners of Shack House and fans of both you and Shackelford. You guys are still friendly. You guys are.
Where we haven't had contact recently, but I still follow Jeff on all of his social media. I read his blog religiously. Love Jeff. Yep. So
Sure. No ill will.
No ill will at all.
So Fairway Rollin. Fairway. I mean, I can from. It's interesting about podcasts is, and maybe you're new to this. I'm new to the podcast game. I've only been doing this since the pandemic started. So I'm like 4 months in.
It's very impressive what you've been pulling off here, Beltway. It's been a great job. You're doing a great job.
I appreciate that. But one of the things, it's always tricky to kind of figure out how popular other shows are. You can see your own metrics very easily, and I'm sure there's ways, I just haven't figured them out yet. But one thing it's clear from the few ways that I do know is Fairway Rollin is up there. You guys get a lot of listens. You have a huge audience. You guys pump out shows.
Well, we do the best we can. I mean, it's nice of you to say, the compliment around the popularity of it. I mean, part of that for sure comes from the fact that the Ringer platform is a nice distribution platform, and we do the best we can. But I tip of the hat to guys like No Laying Up, tip of the hat to the Fried Egg guys. Love the Shotgun Start. Brendan and Andy do a great job.
What's almost remarkable is how many golf podcasts are out there.
Yeah, well,
if you go on iTunes and you scroll down, because I scroll down because I'm trying to find mine because I'm towards but it's just the amount of number, just the sheer volume of just golf. I mean, let alone every other industry, every other topic that you have a podcast on.
Yeah.
Just golf. I mean, it's in the hundreds.
It dawned on people, I think in the last 24 months, the barrier to entry for podcasts, not very high.
Not very
if you
high.
have the equipment and, a little bit of savvy, a little bit of understanding of some basic publishing, tech publishing, digital publishing stuff, you can do it.
The Ringer network also recently got purchased.
It did. Spotify,
The Ringer and Joe Rogan.
The Ringer and Joe Rogan. That's, pretty good. Pretty good company.
A couple solid purchases by Spotify. But has that changed anything on your guys as far as as Joe House and doing his podcast?
So far, no. I haven't gotten any notes asking me to tone anything down. I'm still yelling at top volume.
Yeah.
So I expect any day now for them to say, that the gig is up.
All right. So I want to dive into the DMV here and the golf here. But one of the things I want to kind of skew it on, because you do have another podcast that's not golf related. You're a bit of a foodie.
I would never call myself a foodie. I am an enthusiastic eater.
There you go. I like that better. I don't even like that. The term foodie is kind of
because that implies a certain level of understanding, comprehension. Now I don't have any of that. What I know is a great plate of food in front of my face, and how much I enjoy it, and how much I want it to go for the second plate. That's really what the show is about.
So, and the show being the House of Carbs.
House of Carbs. Yes.
Which I've listened to many times. It's pretty entertaining. So, bringing it back to local golf. Let's start off. So, what are some courses that you like around here? Where do you play a lot?
Well, I used to keep my handicap right here at East Potomac Park. Yeah, I mean for years and years and years, my handicap was right here. Now the hilarious thing is, DC doesn't have its own status and standing on the USGA network. So you're
Maryland,
Maryland,
right?
Yes. So I was keeping a handicap in the Maryland system, even though I was right here in the nation's capital. But
that's like me. I live in Virginia. East Potomac is the closest course to my house. I used to keep my handicap here as well. I don't anymore, but it was interesting because I'm living right here. It's the closest course to my house, and that's Maryland.
Yeah, it's Maryland. That's exactly right. I'm glad to hear that as a Virginia person. I'm married to a woman from Virginia. That's why I live in the district. She won't move to Maryland. I will never move to Virginia, and so we've been together the entire time, right here, splitting it down the middle.
That's interesting.
But so East Potomac is obviously near and dear to my heart. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds. The diversity here is incredible, and by diversity I'm not just talking about people from different walks of life. I'm talking about the experience of golf here. It's every type of golfer, male, female, international, domestic. It's part of the beauty of Washington DC is the diversity of experience that this area offers up. And you can on any given day walk down here and play with an Irish kid who's over here for a job, and a guy that is moved here from Australia 2 years ago, and or you can play with a judge right here at the district municipal court, and two lawyers who are coming down on their lunch break, sneaking away for a couple hours of billable time. It's part of the immense unique charm of this place, and then DC kind of writ large. So that experience, I think, is very particular to this place, this facility, East Potomac Park, which, the amazing renovation that's coming from the National Links Trust guys, and all credit to Mike and Will and all of their whole team on putting together the successful proposal to renovate this facility and keep it a facility for the people. Here, Rock Creek Park in Langston, I'm just so impressed by their commitment to it. I've, tried to do my part in terms of money donations, and somewhere along the way there should be an opportunity to do other kinds of donations. But Langston is a gem. Yeah. It's a gem. I've played there 50 times in my life, and part of my when I really caught the bug, I grew up playing in high school. I really caught the bug in law school because it was a much better alternative to studying, sitting in a library on a beautiful sunny September day. Go catch the 18 and then we can get to the studying in the evening. I went to law school at Catholic University and lived in the district while I was attending, and basically the rule was any golf course within 90 minutes we would be willing to go play. So lots of times it was here, it was Sligo, it was Northwest Park.
Could you ever get, because is Catholic, is the law school, is it right near the main campus?
Yep.
So that's right next door is the Armed Forces Soldiers Home course.
Yes, yep.
Were you ever able to get out there much? I played it once, but
I didn't play that while I was in law school. So they opened up they have a membership there, and they opened it up to to folks in the neighborhoods, and I was friends with a guy in the neighborhood. I played there a whole slew of times also. I didn't get to play there while I was in law school though.
They've got a funny membership. Last time I looked at it was anybody that's I want to say it's like less than $1,000. It's
super inexpensive.
It's not much, but it comes with it. You have to. It's like almost like community service. There's like a 30 hours of like maintenance that every member's got to do on the course.
Yes.
As part of membership, which is pretty funny. But that's a cool little facility. Hopefully at some point that becomes a little bit more open. I don't know if that'll ever happen.
I don't know. It's an incredibly beautiful resource right in the heart of the city. Yeah. That's really unknown, untrod sort of territory. So some of the charm is how special it feels situated within the community. It's a little haven, a little oasis.
Do you have ever so your love of food and your love of golf? Any particular food items at golf courses?
Right here, the bacon cheeseburger. So you don't have to get bacon on it.
Sure.
But why wouldn't you?
Right.
So I do. Obviously, this place is absolutely terrific.
They've got good fare. What my go-to in the morning is the half smoked egg and cheese.
Yes. Iconic, you legendary. No, where that's exactly right. And it is a very on-brand DC item. Langston, bacon, egg, cheese, jelly. I was introduced to that concept over at Langston.
That's hilarious.
Sweet and savory, that combination, right? The ooey gooey egg.
Are they putting jelly on everybody's bacon? Or you have to ask for that?
You have to ask for it.
Gotcha,
but look, when you're at these courses with their local specialties, the right way to experience the venue is lots of times through the mouth and the belly.
Absolutely.
You know this,
Alex. I don't know if you heard this, but I sat down with Ernie Andrews from Langston. It was like my third or fourth episode of this, but he told a story of back in the 80s in Mike Tyson's heyday when he was coming through DC, and he talks about how his host in town, this is before he had a house here, but and this is when I think he was the champion, and they brought him to Langston because he was looking for some food. He wasn't going there to play golf. And they go and he's like, "What are we doing here? We're at a golf course." And it was because they were the best wings in town. And Tyson went in there and he chowed down on some wings and loved it. But one place I don't know if you ever had this, but you ever been out to Henson Creek in Fort Washington? It's a little 9-holer.
I have not.
They've got, but it's a municipal PG County little 9-holer, right, kind of almost in walking distance to Rosecroft Raceway.
Okay.
But they've got a salmon cake sandwich. That I think is only. Last time I checked, the kitchen's not open right now during the pandemic, but it was only available on the weekends.
Wow.
But one of the more unique sandwiches that you'd find at a golf course and out of this world. Absolutely dynamite.
Okay.
So put that on your list.
That's on the list. Henson Creek.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? So
20-ounce beers at Sligo. That's in the paper. Not the tall paper cups. That the hot dog, but the 20-ounce beers there. That was they played an important part of my development.
And Sligo's actually they got a a pit barbecue guy, like that's renting out the kitchen there now. They're on the bottom floor. So I think he was a food truck at first.
Okay.
Showing up to the course like on the weekends in
Yeah.
prime time, and now he's moved into the kitchen, so you can get some good pit barbecue up there.
That's a great hit. I haven't been over there in a bit.
I mean, one of the things, obviously, before this pandemic, when golf has kind of had an uptick.
Yes.
Before that, in golf, rounds of golf had kind of been going down. I think a lot of golf courses were trying to be creative in how they could get extra streams of revenue. And Sligo is a perfect example of that. They were doing concerts like every week and trying to figure out other ways.
Well, they were also early movers with the foot golf.
That's right.
You'd run into folks doing that. I even tried it a couple times out there. Yeah, just to see. Did
you like it?
No.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up as a soccer guy, so it's like fine. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm not against it, but
Me either.
I have not tried it yet.
It was just something fun to try.
Yeah. Do you have any? One of the things that I lament a lot, since I'm cruising around playing different public courses all the time for the most part, is we've lost a lot of courses.
Yes.
There was the Tiger Bump, and they built a lot of courses.
Yep.
And then over the last 5-10 years, we've lost a bunch. Any in the area that you played that you miss at all?
Two that broke my heart. Beech Tree up near Bully Rock in Havre de Grace, Maryland, was incredible. An unbelievable gem. The piece of property, the variety of terrain, and it was Beechree. And I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, the owners sold it for military housing up there, and I just
at the Aberdeen Proving Ground. Right?
Aberdeen, exactly right. That's exactly right. So that was a huge bummer. I mean, we would absolutely get in the car at 6:30 in the morning to get up there to play a 9:30 in the morning round, drive the 80 minutes to get up there, have a breakfast sandwich, hit some balls. A beautiful golf course. Cannon Ridge down in Fredericksburg was also an incredible venue. And both of these are like, they fit that category of slightly higher end, more of a country club for a day kind of feel. But just because of the amount of resources that the operators dumped into trying to make them special in terms of design and concept. A local course that doesn't seem like that has closed recently, that doesn't seem like it's going to reopen, is Redgate. In your backyard, where you grew up.
All the time,
me too. Right there in Rockville, that the city of Rockville owned and operated for a long time. It was a money loser, and the competition from other Montgomery County venues, I think, it kind of fell victim to that, and they're still wrangling with whether or not they want to invest in the renovation and upkeep of it.
Is that right? I thought it was a done deal.
It might be a done deal.
I had lost any hope of it coming back. But,
yeah.
So before we started recording here, we were talking a little bit about your background, and you mentioned that as a youth in this town, you were into the what was the music
like the
scene?
independent music scene.
Sure.
Yeah, and this is one of the nice.
When you say that, is that we're talking like DC punk? We're talking
DC punk, DC hardcore.
Discord records.
Discord records. Absolutely right. Yeah, that was all going on as I was a kid in high school, and made a lot of great friends through that scene, and just was a huge fan of it. And it was like an organic, spontaneous thing where kids were really motivated to do it themselves.
Sure.
They didn't, this was an era where record labels dominated the entire music industry in the 80s and early 90s. And this was just a group of kids who were like, we're just going to go play music. And anybody who will let us in the door to play music, go up on a stage. So I was going to shows at the Chevy Chase Community Centers in Bethesda, libraries. And then as the bands, the Fort Reno concert series, which is still going on amazingly.
Sure.
Anywhere that the bands could play, they would go play, and we would jump in the car and go, or jump on the Metro.
Yeah. Rock Creek had a little bit of that vibe, didn't it? I mean, you don't think punk rock and golf necessarily. They're probably two of the most, on the face of it, they couldn't be more opposite. But in the 80s and 90s, Rock Creek had a little bit of a punk vibe.
It was very much it was a do-it-yourself kind of joint. Absolutely right. I mean, you could go there for very, very little money and get on there, and they would let you kind of invent your golf day. And if you wanted to spend 12 to 14 hours there and do the loops and however many variety of ways you wanted to do them, and go over to the putting green and get into some games that way. That do-it-yourself ethos absolutely present at Rock Creek, and no frills, right? Nobody cared, no pretension, just get out there and do the thing that you love and do it yourself.
I love it. What else? So we had a hell of a U.S. Open just ended this weekend. I listened to your podcast last night.
Yeah, so incredible, and Bryson DeChambeau is such an interesting character at the moment, and all of the discussion and dialogue around his style of golf, his approach to golf, and whether or not it's viable and sustainable, and will he physically be able to withstand the physical duress that he's putting himself through with this kind of weight gain and speed gain. And at the end of the day, and shout out to the Tony Kornheiser podcast, Tony and Michael, on their podcast today, we're sort of going through the U.S. Open recap, and Michael mentioned a stat that we referenced on our podcast last night also, which is the enormous improvement for Bryson, in addition to the speed and everything else, is his putting. Mm-hmm. He went from mid 150th in the world in strokes gained putting, and he's in the top 10 now. Yeah. And the two events that he's won, he's led the field in putting. It's still putting. It's still being in the correct position, because he's hit it so far down, and then managed through sheer strength and will to have wedges or short irons in his hand to get on the greens in a position to make putts from the correct position. He wasn't above holes very often. That's obviously, a testament to his game plan, his strategy, and his skill. But it is kind of funny to me, this immediate, sort of sound the alarm around the bomb and gouge style of golf. Colin Morikawa is not a bomb and gouge guy. No. Stuart Sink, who won 1 week ago, not a bomb and gouge guy. Jim Herman, who won in Sedgefield, preceding the FedEx Cup playoffs, not a bomb and gouge guy. There's room for all variety and strengths. Now, I absolutely understand and sympathize with the criticism of, the advances in technology and the ball and what impact that has on competitive golf and the golf course and all of that. I personally, just me talking, I think of golf as something, professional golf that's on TV. I just like to watch it. Yeah. And what I like is the competition. And the competition, to me, it's a level playing field every single time the guys go out at a venue. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of proven out by the variety of winners and the variety of skills that the winners bring to the table. Now, Dustin Johnson's tear lately, suggests that style of golf and the last four U.S. Open winners, Brooks Koepka, Gary Woodland, Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, they all fit a certain sort of profile.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryson might be a good candidate for maybe your first crossover between your two podcasts. House of Carbs.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's definitely his own unique house of carbs. There's no two ways about it. The number of calories that he consumes every day and his particular food consumption game plan. I do think that there's an opportunity to get some insight there. Phil Mickelson's another one. Phil, we talked about him on the pod also. He's sort of slowly morphing from professional golfer to professional marketer, which is fine because he's great at it and he's hilarious, but his coffee brand and what he's doing in terms of nutrition and his sort of later in life recognition of how important diet is. And what
I don't know anything about it. He's got a coffee brand?
He's got a coffee brand that he's launched because he lost all of this weight, a year ago by going on this diet and using, the combination of certain nutritional elements, oils and powders and, just trying to get the right sort of combination of, but basically it was like calorie deprivation with some important fortifying vitamins and minerals, and then using coffee as kind of the vehicle for sating his diet until he ate. But the line's coming out. I'm excited to give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely. What about Joe House? Are you a bomb and gouge guy?
I am not. I am a dink and dunk guy. As a homegrown player and a homegrown swing, the first lesson I had in my entire life was during law school or after law school, when a girlfriend at the time bought me lessons. So I went a full 10 years in my golf career without ever having professional eyes on my swing. And at that point in time, I loved the game when I was a kid. We would go to the University of Maryland, that driving range there, and smack balls off the mats. And then that was back when the pond that sits between number 2 and number 10 used to have fish in it. So you could hit some balls, a 15, 16-year-old, you could hit some balls at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would let you walk. You could walk. It's not that they would let you. Yeah. We didn't ask permission. Sure. With our fishing, we'd bring our golf clubs and our fishing rods and go over there and try and catch some. But I didn't get eyes on my swing, so I have a homegrown, homemade swing. I've been excited. I got myself all the way down to a low 10 handicap this year through the sheer volume of rounds. But I'm not what anybody would say is a power player. I have decent hands, good hand-eye coordination.
There you go. That's good short game. That's all you need. No, I would willing to bet we've never played before, but we're probably pretty similar.
We're going to write that wrong. Yeah, we're going to correct that.
I would love to do that.
Yeah,
but no, my handicap is in the same ballpark, but going the wrong direction.
Well, I just put in 2 rounds that were 8 or 9 strokes higher than because it's golf and golf is hard.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
One of at the Ringer, you mentioned this earlier, David Chang.
Yes.
Who is he has a podcast as part of the Ringer Network? Or
he does. Yeah. I mean, Dave Chang's got a lot of stuff going on, but he wanted to do something in terms of a podcast, and there was a natural link. He was out in LA. He opened up a restaurant in LA, and he had some friends in common with Bill Simmons, and they got to know each other and immediately became friends. I had met Dave Chang before Bill met him, and we have a common connection here to the DMV.
Sure.
And Dave grew up playing golf.
Yeah.
Was a nationally ranked junior way back in the day, playing out in Vienna and McLean where he was raised. His dad founded Golfdom.
Yeah, I had the owner of Golfdom on.
That's right, you had Buddy on.
Yeah, Buddy told the whole story.
Buddy's the best.
Yeah, I knew a little bit about that, but not, he gave us the whole story. It was really fascinating.
Yeah.
But Dave Chang, he had Momofuku DC.
He did,
which unfortunately closed. Was that pandemic related or not?
It was 100%. Yeah, he went to the. I don't want to tell tales out of school. Sure. He couldn't come to an agreement with the landlord. We'll just put it that way. They couldn't reach terms that made sense.
But obviously, this is extremely. There's a lot of industries getting hurt. Much worse than others with everything going on, but the restaurant industry is certainly one of them, obviously.
And especially independent restaurants. Yeah. I mean, the chains all have access to capital and access to banks and access to stimulus and all that. It's the regular folks that have been out, just had a kind of a dream, wanted to do food as their way of making a living. that are having the toughest challenges, and that's who we've been trying, my family, in terms of like during the pandemic, who are we going to order food from when you have that choice between a chain or somebody that's been in the DC area for a long time, doing their best. We're always choosing the local.
That's good policy that everybody should adapt. I know that a lot of the I just learned I worked in the restaurant industry for a long time in this city.
Oh, okay.
I bartended for more years than I care to.
Are you allowed to say where?
Sure, I bartended at multiple places. The most well-known place, it's funny, I was joking with my buddies the other day, I bartended maybe 6 or 7 places in the city. There's only one that's still open.
Yeah.
But that one's Madam's Organ in DC. I bartended at Madam's Organ in the early 2000s. But one of the ones that you'll get kicked out of was, do you remember it was right next to, then it was called the MCI Center, The Rock.
The Rock.
It was right on 7th Street.
Yes, I remember The Rock.
It was sure. Yes, it was a real skinny 3-story building, but this was back when there wasn't a whole lot down there.
Yeah.
It was right when Abe Poland opened up the MCI Center, and you had the Irish Bar on 6th Street, Fado,
which is closed now.
Yeah. You had the brewery, the District Chop House.
Yep.
You had a Fuddruckers.
Yes, that's right.
And that was kind of it.
That was kind of it.
And then Joe Englert, who actually just recently
Yeah, I saw
passed.
that. R.I.P. Joe Englert.
Yeah, so he owned the Rock, and I worked for him for a little while, and it was a sports bar, 3 stories, right in the shadow of the MCI Center.
Of course, I remember.
And it was such a hilarious place because literally, like, what he would do is he would take like old Sports Illustrateds and take like the full picture out of a page, and he would just rip it out and stick it in a frame that he got from Goodwill. And that was like that was on the
decor on the walls.
The decor of the whole entire place. But we
Yeah,
used to get
man.
the Caps would come in and play Bubble Boy tournaments, and it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
But yeah, no, but restaurants are strange. So one of the places, my first places I ever worked at, I don't know if you, Flanagan's in Bethesda, Maryland.
Sure, I know
Old
Flanagan's.
Irish bar. And they just announced due to the pandemic, they've been there for 35 years, and they're closing down just like last week. So
Just sucks.
it's certainly a tough time for restaurants. But the golf, listen, this has been great.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's been.
I can't wait to play.
Yeah, we should. Let's get
overdue.
out and play.
Yeah.
I appreciate you supporting this little fledgling Beltway Golfer podcast.
Keep doing your thing. I love it. I mean, this is, your commitment to shining a light on sort of underreported stories. I loved that you had on what's the podcast, the DMV guys?
Golf DMV.
Golf DMV. I love that, those guys. And
those
their
guys are great. They're
podcast.
hilarious.
Yeah, and they've been at it for a long time, but it's not, you like getting the word out isn't that easy. So
much of it is intertwined.
Yes.
Claude, who's like the main kind of leader of the Golf DMV, he does some work with Kornheiser.
I know.
Because he's in that industry.
I know.
And I only met him. I had listened to their podcast, but I met him at a National Links Trust event at Chatter.
Oh, wow.
Because the reason they held it at Chatter was because Andy Johnson from the Fried Egg was in town, and he was going to interview Mike and Will on the podcast when Tony had his studio in Chatter, which, I'm sure you did the same back when it was Chadwick's. I used to, the amount of times I saw Last Call there was,
100%. A lot of times, a lot of last calls there. That's right.
It's a small town.
Yeah, that's right. It's part of the charm.
That's right. Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate it, Joe, very much. And
Mr. Beltway, anytime you put out the signal, I'm there.
I don't have a good golf game, but I don't really care. I'm a regular dude living in DC, and I want to know about DC-centric golf stuff. If you can tell me something that I don't already know, then that is great for me. I don't want the regular stuff. I want exciting stuff. I want different stuff. I want stuff I can't hear elsewhere. But I want it to be about DC golf.